Guys, it's Reynad back, this time doing my review of Blackrock Mountain. This is something people wanted me to do for a long time. You know, they'd release a few cards here and there. People kept asking me what I thought about them, told me I should make a video about it. But I wanted to hold off until all the cards were out there because it's pretty tough to evaluate how good cards are until all of them are spoiled. And I also didn't really want to annoy you guys with like 12 different videos, you know, where I just ramble. Anyway, all the cards are out. I'm going to start off with the class cards and just kind of go through them one by one. So let's start off with Druid. Druid of the Flame is the first card here. It's a 3 mana, you know, one of the choice cards that Druid classically has. So you either get a 5/2 or a 2/5. Honestly, there's never been a creature that I could think of that's had either of those stats for 3 mana, so it's very interesting. You'll see kind of a theme in Blackrock Mountain is that the 3-drops are like way better than they were before. So we're not going to be seeing things like Shade and X-Ramus in every class anymore because there's just way more choices. Anyway, Druid of the Flame, it's a pretty good card, and it's hard to evaluate just how good because, like I said, there's never been a card with these kinds of stats. So do I think it's better than Shade and X-Ramus, which is the 3-drop you usually see in Druid decks? I think it's not because it doesn't have as good of Savage Roar synergy, but you might see like 1 Druid of the Flame or like 2 Druid of the Flame, 2 Shade, and like a lower curve Druid deck. Either way, it's definitely playable. I don't know if it's quite good enough to see play over other good choices though, like Shade and X-Ramus. One thing it's worth pointing out is both of those things it transforms into are beasts, and that would matter with the Druid of the Fang card that becomes a 7/7 for 5 mana if you have a beast. If that card wasn't unplayable, because even if it was a 7/7 all the time, beasts or not, still wouldn't be putting it in my Druid deck. So I don't think the beast thing's too relevant, but you know, maybe they release more beast-related cards. Maybe they're just trying to buff Hemet. We'll see. Our next card's Volcanic Lumber. I mean, it's a 7/8 taunt for 1,000,000 mana, and if you kill a bunch of dudes, it still costs 1,000,000 mana. It's unplayable for all the same reasons that Earth Elemental is. It's not the overload that makes Earth Elemental unplayable. It's the fact that you spend a turn playing it, and then if your opponent has Black Knight or Big Game Hunter, which is a card I'm going to mention a hell of a lot in this review, because it's not getting changed. Basically, if they have either of those cards, you lose the game, and that just makes the card unplayable because BGH, Black Knight, they're pretty popular. If there's ever a Volcanic Lumber deck that's threatening to become as popular as Zoo or something, people just put, you know, Big Game Hunters, Black Knights in their deck and puts an end to that deck. So point is, not playable. I don't think it'll see much play at all. Quick Shot, next card. Now, there are a lot of cards that people want to say is like the best card when a set's released. In GVG, a lot of people would say that Dr. Boom was the best, in their opinion. And by that metric, it's really hard to say a class card is the best because you're going to play against neutral cards way more than you're going to play against class cards. I think that Quick Shot is actually the best card because I don't think there's any neutral in this set that is going to be played in 100% of decks, whereas I think Quick Shot will be played in 100% of Hunter decks because this card is stupid. And honestly, as much as people hate Hunter, the class kind of deserved it. It didn't really get much in GVG, if anything. It got like Glaive Zuka or something. But as you add more and more of these auto-includes into Face Hunter, the deck just becomes more and more efficient. So after a while, they're going to need some good anti-aggro tools for other decks to be able to compete with it. But Quick Shot's amazing. You're going to see 2 of it in every Hunter deck. I mean, mid-range, Face Hunter, it doesn't matter. The card's just stupid, so definitely a powerful addition to Hunter. Core Rager, on the other hand, pretty sure this card's not the best. I mean, 4 mana is honestly a very big commitment. In order to make the best use of this card, you're going to want a class like a Hunter deck that empties its hand fast, which is like Face Hunter. And if you look at current Face Hunter lists, they're not playing any cards that cost over 4 mana. The most expensive cards are Wolf Rider, Arcane Golem, Animal Companion. There's not usually anything that costs more than that unless they're randomly playing Leroy. So you're already playing like a card that's too expensive for a Face Hunter deck, but you have to play Face Hunter with this because you need a Hunter deck that can empty its hand. Like, you don't want to be playing this in mid-range Hunter with Savannah High Mains, I don't think. Maybe that would be okay, but honestly, I don't think this card's good enough to make the cut. It's competing with degenerate cards like Piloted Shredder that are just way too overpowered, so I just don't expect this to see much play at all. On to Mage, though. We got Dragon's Breath. It's a hard card to evaluate because I've been playing a lot of Mage lately, honestly, and I've been trying some really unique lists with it. Like the Flood Mage deck I made on stream got really popular. And in that deck, I could see playing Dragon's Breath, and yeah, I'm playing things like Mirror Image, Arcane Intellect. I mean, basically, Mage has so many spell synergies. Manworm, Sorcerer's Apprentice, I mean, Flamewaker, as I'm about to talk about. So maybe this is playable just because it's like another decent spell that you can throw out. I don't think there's going to be room in most Mage decks, though. I think it's just a little too inefficient to really be worthwhile. Most of the time, it looks like it's going to be a Shadow Bolt that can go to the face, which is definitely good, but it's not like an auto-include in Mage, I would say. So, playable, but only in some very niche decks. I don't think we're going to see much Dragon's Breath unless something crazy happens. Flamewaker, on the other hand, this is the card that Flood Mage was missing. I'm super excited for this guy. This is going to push Tempo Mage like as... I mean, it's going to cement it as a Tier 1 Mage deck. I think the deck will be better than Mech because of this. Because Mech decks are a little linear right now in how they're built. You just kind of play dudes, go face. If you mess up on your curve, you lose the game. You don't have a lot of control in your draws. There's not a lot of flexibility. It's easy to play against Mech Mage. Whereas Tempo Mage, it has a lot of the same strengths as Mech Mage. You put shit on the board early, you snowball if you get ahead, and you have a lot of burn to go to the face late game. I think Tempo Mage might be the future of the class, and this card will definitely be a centerpiece of that. So, we'll see. Definitely going to be praying to have coin every single game with that deck now, but Flamewaker is very strong, and I really like this card. On to Paladin, we have Solemn Vigil. It's a card that's a bit tougher to judge. I could give you like a 30-minute speech about this thing called card velocity, I guess is what I would call it, but it's basically like the balance of card draw versus board plays in your deck. So you, how do I put it? A deck like Face Hunter, for example, has like 0 card velocity. It's not playing things like Arcane Intellect. It's just 100% turns its cards into board, into face damage. Whereas a deck like Druid, for example, has a really good balance of card velocity, as Ancient Allures, Azure Drakes, cards that draw you into other cards that draw you into other cards. So that as the game goes on, your hand's never empty. You always have stuff to play. Point is, Paladin is one of those decks that's pretty balanced in its curve. It has a good amount of late game, mid game, early game, just as a class when you're building it mid range, which is generally the best list. So because you have that good balance of curve, and it's already has a good balance of card draw to board plays, I don't think Solemn Vigil is going to see play, because you just don't need an Arcane Intellect type of effect in the deck. One thing worth noting is Paladin is one of the best classes to use this mechanic in that makes things cheaper. Like, we might see Solemn Vigil just because it's insane with muster for battle. You know, you trade with 1 minion, 3 of your own die. It's a 1-mana draw to. It's pretty good, but I feel like it's going to make you make awkward plays a lot of times that you don't want to make. Like if you have Quartermaster, you don't really want to be trading off your muster tokens. But then if you just don't put Quartermaster in your deck, then your muster is a lot weaker. So personally, I think Solemn Vigil is just a little too awkward to really see play unless there's some sort of miracle-ish version of it that needs to be... It really needs the card draw. Alright, next card is Dragon Consort. It's one of the more exciting ones in the set. I think this is the only like class dragon that got printed, and it's fucking amazing. This card's great. It's a 5-mana 5/5, which is great stats. It's exactly what you want out of your 5-mana card. The battle cry is phenomenal. I mean, a lot of times it'll let you wreck them with the neutral 6/4 dragon. That's cheaper if minions trade off. So honestly, it's just Paladin is the class that's going to have the most fun with dragons, it looks like, just because of this card. It's really powerful. Cheating on mana has just always been one of the most powerful effects in Hearthstone by far, and I mean all card games, honestly. Those are the kinds of cards that get banned in Magic. So Dragon Consort is insane. I expect it to see a lot of play. I expect people to experiment with dragon-type Paladin decks. I mean, will they be better than normal mid-range Paladin? I don't know. Maybe. Hopefully. I'm sure they're cooler. So, excited to try that guy out. Let's see. Next on to Priest, we have Twilight Whelp. Let's see, if you're holding a dragon, gain +2 health. Pretty sure this card sucks. Like, Priest already has Northshire Cleric and Zombie Chow, and in some versions of Priest I would play an extra 1 or 2 Zombie Chows, but would I be willing to put a bunch of dragons in my deck for that? Maybe. Depends on how good they end up being in this class. The 4-mana dragon that gets buffed for every time you target it is pretty powerful in Priest, with cards like Power Word Shield, so maybe Twilight Whelp would see some play because of that, but I don't think it's quite strong enough. Like, the interesting thing is that it is a dragon, but it's one that you kind of want to get out of your hand early, so it's not really going to be enabling your other dragon cards unless you draw it late game and you already have one of those. It'll be really interesting to see how this mechanic plays out, because it's so tough to evaluate cards like this until you see how strong dragon-based class decks are. Like, how good is Dragon Priest? I don't know. Anyway, on to Resurrect. Summon a random friendly minion that died this game. So you can make this card pretty effective every time you play it if you build your Priest deck in a way that you're not playing any crappy dudes in it. You probably don't want to be playing things like Light of Naru in your Priest deck if you're playing Resurrect, because you don't want to be respawning Light Warden. If you're playing it with the 4-mana dragons and stuff, then you're getting back pretty big stuff with this. It's actually really powerful when you're getting like a 4-mana card for 2 mana. You're getting it later in the game, so it's not as good as getting it turn 2, but it's still a very weird effect, and there's a lot of cards in the set that are super hard to evaluate. Will I think Resurrect see play? I think you'll see some amount of play. It's a card I definitely have to experiment with. I don't think it's just going to make its own like Priest archetype, but it might be a really powerful value card to have 1 or 2 of in most Priest decks. Priest, as bad of a class as it is actually one of the hardest classes to fit cards into, because there are just so many good class cards. So it's very likely this card just will be on the sidelines and we won't see much of it, but I could see it seeing a good amount of play as well. It would have to be in a Priest deck without things like Zombie Chow, though, which is pretty uncommon. Alright, Rogue. Now, before I saw the last few cards get released for Blackrock Mountain, I thought Rogue would be the best class on release. Across all classes, I thought it would be the best deck, and I think it still might be. Even though it got this card Gang Up, which is complete and utter shit, completely unplayable. I think this card's terrible, we'll never see play for any reason. Let's move on to the other guy, Dark Iron Skulker. The second best card Rogue got in the set, behind one of the neutral cards I'll talk about. Dark Iron Skulker seems pretty powerful to me. Like, every time I've played Rogue, basically there's like 3 types of cards in your deck, right? You have your cards that kill stuff, you have your dudes that kill your opponent, and then you have your card draw that draws you into the other 2 types of cards. Skulker, it's a dude, so it gets you like board presence, and it's also removal, all in one card. It's very efficient. Honestly, just looking at it, I think it's going to be pretty powerful. Card looks very good to me, and I don't know, the stats are kind of small for something that expensive, and maybe the effect won't be that insane, but I'm pretty sure this card's like very, very good. And I look forward to playing 2 of it in Tempo Rogue. The thing about Rogue is, all you need in that class to make it be good is you just need to stick an idiot that's hitting them in the face, and then you just kill all their stuff. And this card is so good for that strategy. It gives you a dude in play that hits them hard, and it kills stuff. So if your hand, by putting more of these cards in your deck, your hand is never going to be like all removal where you're doing nothing and losing slowly. Your hand's never going to be all dudes where you just have no removal and you get run over by aggro decks. This card's like, it fills both roles, so I think it's pretty good, and I expect Rogue to be probably the class I climb with right out of the gate. I think it'll be the best class still after seeing all the cards. It's just, some of the cards like Sap got so much better with the set being released, so much better. Anyway, on to Shaman. Fire Guard Destroyer. This guy's pretty big. I mean, what is he, like an average 5'6", 6'6"? For 4 mana. The interesting thing about him is he kills the 4 mana dragon neutral. That might see a lot of play. The one that summons a 1 mana minion for your opponent. So, Fireguard Destroyer, another overload cards that's going to make the Lava Shock that I'm going to talk about next a lot better, but it's a very efficient minion. Is this what Shaman needed to really stop being the worst class in the game for once? It can't hurt. I mean, it's playable. It doesn't help with things that beat you as Shaman, though, too much. Things like Hunter you want life gain against, but you don't really want to put cards like Vitality Totem or Antique Healbot into your Shaman deck, because then your deck is just reactive and you have to draw the right answers in the right order. So what makes a class good is like strong proactive cards. Fireguard Destroyer is pretty strong proactive. I mean, the way that you beat Hunter is not by putting a bunch of cards like Vitality Totem into your deck and losing to all the control decks. The way you beat Hunter is just killing them first, and I think this card helps with that strategy, so excited to see another proactive Shaman card, and it seems pretty good to curve Unbound Elemental into this. It's very powerful. Anyway, on to Lava Shock. Card's really tough to evaluate, but it seems like all the good Shaman cards that they've spoiled are, I mean, all the high power level Shaman cards seem to have overload, right? So this can let you do crazy things. Earth Elemental, still not a thing, still completely garbage, but Unbound Elemental gets a lot better with this card. It might be worth it to play Feral Spirits again. It probably will be, actually. It's probably the best synergy. Lightning Storm, of course. This Fireguard Destroyer guy is pretty good. I mean, it's just a lot of good Shaman overload cards that you want to be playing now. So I think Overload Shaman is kind of, I mean, it's worth trying out. I don't know if it's enough to make the class good. So much is going to change with these cards coming out that it's really tough to say. But you kind of have to look back on the old cards and see which old cards got better. For example, the reason I think Rogue is so good is because Sap is so good now, as well as the hero power on Rogue being so good with the Dragon neutral that I'm going to talk about. The point is with Shaman, Lava Shock's a good card, Fireguard Destroyer is a good card. Is it all going to come together and put the class into a good spot in the metagame? That's what nobody can really say for sure until we play with the cards. I definitely think Shaman looks stronger, like every other class, of course. You're just getting more stuff. But this doesn't seem like quite enough to push it into being the best deck, because the stuff the other classes got is just a lot better in a lot of cases. So Warlock got 2 3-mana cards. Imp Gang Boss. When I first saw this, I was like, okay, you can compare it to Imp Master. Imp Master gives you a 1-1 right away, and it's a 1-4, so slightly worse stats. But Gang Boss, you know, it's a demon. It's got a little bit more power on it. Definitely a powerful card. Expect to see a good amount of this, actually, in a lot of different strategies. It seems like with the cards they're releasing for Warlock, the best way to build the deck is just with a lot of like sticky minions and then ways to buff them. Abusive Sergeant, Power Overwhelming, and just get efficient trades off. And Gang Boss seems good. You know, I want to draw this card against aggro. I want to draw it against control. I think we'll see a lot of this card, especially because of Demon Wrath, which is some of the coolest artwork in the set. Excited to get a golden version of this card. But deal 2 damage to all non-demon minions. This seems pretty powerful to me. I mean, on top of just being good, like, if you think of it like a Consecrate, if you build your deck around it, it's a 3-mana Consecrate. Consecrate's an insane card. So you just build a mid-rangey demon Warlock deck, you put Demon Wrath in it, all of a sudden you have Consecrates in your deck. Not with equality, but still, a pretty powerful card. And it has all these synergies that, like with cards you're playing anyway, like Nerubian Egg is probably the best one. It kills things like Shade and X-Ramus out of Druid. It's a pretty big deal, even if it might not seem like one. Honestly, I think Demon Wrath is very powerful. I like both the Warlock cards that came out here, and maybe they're good enough to really push the class into being like undisputed tier 1 like it always should be because of that hero power. Blizzard's been very careful about never printing a 1-mana Warlock card again. The fact that Warlock hero power is what it is completely warps what kind of neutral 1-mana cards they can even make. So it's interesting to see that we see more 3-mana crap, but this is pretty good 3-mana crap. So I still think the class will be very powerful, of course. It'll never be like bad. Will it be tier 1? Depends on how well Demon Wrath is positioned. Is it going to kill off common things being played? I think so. Also has pretty good synergy with those cards that are cheaper if you kill stuff, so excited to try that out. Axe Flinger, 4 mana, 2/5. Whenever it takes damage, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. Face Warrior is just... This is the reason it's never going to be a thing again. Basically, as more cards get released, they print more early game crap for other classes. So even when you're playing against Paladin, like sometimes they just go turn 1 Zombie Chow, turn 2 Shielded Mini Bot, and all of a sudden you're already behind on board. You're never going to deal face damage with a minion ever again from that point. And you're playing against basically a control deck that beats you on board by turn 2. So you won't see Axe Flinger making Face Warrior return because it's too easy to set up sticky taunts, Defender of Argus, Sludge Belcher, so your weapons aren't going to deal the full 30 damage. Even the control decks are going to just outboard control you early. So that's the weakness of the deck. It's not control decks that beat Face Warrior, it's other aggressive decks that beat Face Warrior because they just get on board earlier. And if I play like a turn 1 Leper Gnome, Face Warrior has to like attack it with War Axe, and then it's a really inefficient trade because if you don't attack it with War Axe, then Leper Gnome ends up pyroblasting you. So I don't think this is enough to make that type of deck good, and it's really not good in Control Warrior because you don't really care about dealing damage to their face. So I don't think we'll see much of this card. I think it's just a little too low power level in a class that has so many other good options. Revenge is an interesting card. The first time I saw it, I thought it was just unplayable because Whirlwind's just 1 mana. I mean, you're almost never going to be below 12. But then the more I thought about it, the more this card seems pretty good to me as a 1-of. Like, Whirlwind is still fine most of the time at 2 mana, which is what you're going to be playing this as probably 3 out of 5 times. You're going to play it for 1 damage. But then the fact that it's like in your hand lets you completely change how you play the game. Like, you can spend a turn just like equipping Gorehowl or something to like and do the math so that you'll be below 12, and then you like blow them out with this. And then once people are more experienced at playing with and against this card, you'll see people like just not attacking Warrior below 12 on some turns, just like they're playing against Handlock with Molten Giants. So I think like just playing one of this card and threatening that 3 damage is pretty powerful because at some point Whirlwind's going to be good. Like the 1 damage is going to come up at some point, so it's never going to be completely dead. But then you get that blowout where you deal 3 to everything. It's just pretty powerful, I think, and it's going to change how people play against Warrior. And if people play too scared of this card, that makes Warrior even better because if you don't have it, then they're giving you all this free life. We'll see though. Alright, let's get to the neutrals, the more exciting cards, because every class gets to play these. Blackwing Technician, I mean, if you have a dragon, obviously it's good. If you don't, it's obviously worse. It's the same speech everyone's going to give you about this card. Honestly, I think it's pretty underrated, though. 3 mana, 3/5 is just insane if you can get it off. I think it trades favorably with pretty much everything. I thought Spider Tank would be a really big deal after GVG came out, until I realized that 4-attack weapons and Piloted Shredder were going to be so popular. It's like the reason that Spider Tank isn't just farming all these early game minions is because of the popularity of True Silver Champion, Death's Bite, and Piloted Shredder in literally every fucking class in the game. So this, on the other hand, doesn't have that problem. This has 5 health if you have a dragon. So this card should be insane if you have a dedicated dragon deck, which I think there are going to be. There's definitely going to be some. There's probably only going to be 1 or 2 classes where it's like a tier 1 version of the deck, but this card seems very good to me, and it's probably going to be like the core of those decks. I think this is really almost more important than like some of the other synergies. It's so powerful to get those kind of stats on turn 3, and looking at every card that they have spoiled, I still think there's nothing in Hearthstone that like deals with this 3/5. So there's no True Silver Champion or Piloted Shredder or anything that's going to effectively deal with this. If you get it turn 3, you're just stupidly far ahead, I think. So this card should be pretty good. Blackwing Corruptor, okay. I mean, the obvious comparison is Fire Elemental. I really like this card too, honestly. In a dragon-based deck, this is really what rewards you for building that kind of strategy. 5 mana, 5/4 that deals 3 damage is very, very, very good. I mean, it's insane, actually. Being able to deal 3 damage a turn before Fire Elemental is a huge deal, because the minions on turn 5 that are going to be in play are usually smaller, so they'll die to this 3 damage more often. You really can't play around this card ever. It's just going to wreck you if they have the setup. So I expect this to be core in a lot of dragon-based strategies. I really like the card, and looking forward to playing with it. Dragonkin Sorcerer, this is, people talk about Priest a lot when they talk about this card, and that probably is the best class for it. It's a 4-mana dragon, like, really good with your Technician and all that, of course. The question is what classes outside of, like, Priest can really make use of this, and I can't think of many. I mean, you can do stuff with spare parts, you can Shadow Flame it for 4, I guess. It's no different than a Yeti. It just doesn't seem like that insane in most classes, but then the classes that do use this card well seem like it would be insane in the class. Like, if you just put a Velen's Chosen on it or a Power Word Shield, the creature you're getting is just stupid with how efficient it is. But again, all 4 drops in the game have to compete with Piloted Shredder, which is a very, very high bar, because Shredder is literally a 5-mana card for 4 mana. So, like, Dragonkin Sorcerer has to be better than, like, Sludge Belcher level cards, basically, to make for people to make room for it in most classes. So I don't expect it to see an insane amount of play, but then the classes where you do play it, it's going to be so good in, kind of like Violet Teacher. Alright, on to Draconid Crusher. Card's complete garbage. If it was a 9/9 all the time, I still wouldn't play it. End of story. It's literally the same thing as Druid of the Fang. I hate that they're printing cards that are like, if they always got the buff, you still wouldn't put them in your deck. So that's the thing with Druid of the Fang. Beast Druid would be so cool if only they made Druid of the Fang not garbage. Like, if Druid of the Fang was like a 6/10 if you had a Beast, that's payoff. But a 7/7 for 5 I wouldn't play anyway. So, same thing with this. A 9/9 for 6, wouldn't play it anyway. Let's get on to Dragon Egg. This is one of the harder cards to evaluate. It was one of the first cards spoiled. I still don't exactly know how to evaluate it. Doesn't make Zoo better? I mean, it does and it doesn't. The thing is, so many of these other classes got ways to just crush Zoo. Like, for example, Rogue got the card that deals 2 damage to all the undamaged guys. There's this Whirlwind effect that you can't ever beat out of Warrior if they're below 12 life. Warlock got Demon Wrath. Shaman got another cheap removal spell in Lava Shock. They're all going to be playing 2 Lightning Storm now. You know, Priest has Zombie Chow. Flamewalker kills all your stuff. I think that the reason Zoo was so good before, it was a lot of reasons, mostly the Warlock hero power, but it was also that the other classes just didn't have good early game. So you were the only one with like Flame Imp level cards in the early game. Dragon Egg is not Flame Imp level of good, and the other like non-Warlock classes get more ways to fight your board early. Like, if you've ever played against Shielded Minibot with Zoo, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's just, it's not worth playing low power level cards anymore like that to try to like cheese out a win. It's just not, I don't think Dragon Egg's enough to make the deck that insane. Now, for things other than Zoo, I also don't think it's very good, because like Zoo could actually make use of every 2/1 it gets. It has all these buff effects. You can get like 2 triggers out of it, but I just don't see this as being good enough, I guess. My inclination is that it's not good enough as a card. It's not going to be enough to make Zoo playable, just because the rest of Zoo doesn't line up well against the other classes' new early game that they got in GVG and in Blackrock Mountain. Especially if they play like the 3-mana 3/5 guy. If you hold the dragon, Blackwing Technician, like what do you do about that? Anyway, on to Grim Patron. This is a card that's also really tough to evaluate. There's lots of those in this set. It's a pretty like cheap win condition. Obviously, Warriors, where a lot of people are going to consider playing it. It's good with the Whirlwind effects. It's good with like bouncing blades. You can really do some crazy stuff. I mean, if you just like play it, Taskmaster it, hit something. I mean, I could see this easily getting out of hand very quickly. and I'm excited to try some strategies with it, because the thing that interests me about Grim Patron is it's a 5-mana card that has the potential to win you the game on its own if you build your deck around it. And that's a big deal because a lot of times you just don't have the time to play like a 9-mana 4/12. You can't be putting stuff like Ysera in your deck before this set at least, and expect to win the game with that. Whereas Grim Patron's a lot faster. You can just like get it down on the board soon. And it kind of has taunt. Like if you play it against Mech Mage, it's really dangerous for them to let it live because you can just like run it into an Annoytron, and then all of a sudden you have just a much more threatening board. You can Defender of Argus. I think Grim Patron will see play in things outside of Warrior 2. It's a very interesting card, but I think Warrior is the class that it's mostly going to see playing, and I'm excited to try some things out with it as just kind of like a cheap win conditions. If you can build a control deck that's curved stops at like 6 mana, that's a huge deal. That lets you keep up with aggro decks much more easily. Alright, Chromagus, whenever you draw a card, put another copy in your hand. It has good stats. I mean, 6 mana, 6 or 8 mana, 6/8. You know, KT, good stats. Is it better than KT? Probably not, because KT gets immediate value. All you need is a board that can trade in, and then KT is insane. Chromagus like has to live for a turn, and even then, if the card you draw is like a minion, then you probably don't want to play 2 copies of it that turn. You probably play like minion plus spell to catch you up on board. I guess you have a 6/8. Basically, you get if you draw a minion with it, it's going to take like 2 turns before it did anything for you. And if you draw a spell, then I guess it's pretty good. I just don't think it's powerful enough. If you compare its stats to Boulder Fist Ogre, since most of the reason you're playing it is the stats, it's just, I think it's just not good enough, honestly. But the fact that it's a dragon has a lot more value than it did before. So just because it's a dragon that doesn't get big game hunted, just because it's a dragon that you can play on 8 instead of 9, and just because the cards that reward you for having dragons are all insane, maybe this will just see play in like every deck, just because you need some kind of dragon, because cards like Blackwing Corruptor are just too stupid not to play. So I would not be surprised if that's the case, but I don't think it's going to be. Chromagus is like, it's fine, but it's not. I think it's like on the weaker end. It's not OP for sure. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. It's like a fine card, a little bit weak, that I would probably not put into most decks, except it's a dragon, so that shoots its value way up, because the Tinkertown technicians of this set that reward you for having dragons are so much better than they were in GVG. Like, your deck is insane if you're holding a dragon. So Chromagus seems kind of good. It's also going to be interesting to note, like, how are mulligans going to be affected in this set? Like, do I just keep Ysera in my opening hand, just so all my dragon-based cards are insane? Maybe. I know Voidcaller is good enough with only 2 demons in your deck. I mean, that's Warlock, but still, you're going to be drawing more cards, so you can get away with just Mal'Ganis Draxus, and then Voidcaller is still good. So maybe I just put like Ysera Malygos or Ysera Chromagus in my deck and just like mulligan for them, and then all my dragon-based synergy cards are insane. Emperor Theresin. This guy is going to be kind of the Lotheb or the Dr. Boom of the set. I expect to see this guy in a ton of decks. I think he's insane. Basically, you're paying 1 more mana than you should be for a 5/5. Like, a 5/5 for 5 mana is pretty good. So you're only paying 1 more. So you start like down a mana. But then the amount of mana he nets you is equal to how many cards you have in your hand. And most of the time it's going to be like 4 or 5. So you're netting like 3 mana to use whenever you want, which in and of itself is good enough, but then on top of that, it lets you do crazy shit that you weren't even thinking of. Like, you just play Emperor Theresin, and like turn 7 you're threatening Force of Nature Savage Roar for lethal. Or like decks with cards like Ancient Allure really go off with this. Because when you're playing stupid, high-impact, expensive cards, being able to like play 2 things in a turn is just, like, it just win you the game a lot of the time. Everything that's not aggro, I expect to just put this in, because I'm pretty sure it's just stupid. So I expect this to be like the card that you play against the most, I guess, just because it's neutral and it's going to be in every deck that's not aggro. In my opinion, I think it probably should be. Anything that has 4 or more cards in hand on turn 6, it's just going to be very good in. Major Domo Executus, card is just hot garbage. You give me against Big Game Hunter, even if it doesn't, you're paying 9 mana for a War Golem. It's just not good. That's all it comes down to. I mean, this is a 9 mana card that loses to Defender of Argus. It's a 9 mana card with a Death Rattle that's a fucking drawback most of the time because it puts you to 8 life and then you die because your opponent has 10 mana and something in play. Every deck has Burst. Even Paladin could just True Silver you and you're dead. So I don't expect this to see play at all. It's pretty cool, but fuck Ragnaros, fuck this card. I think it's bad. On to Nefarian. 9 mana, 8/8. Big Game Hunter's a thing. A 4/12 is way better than an 8/8, so just off stats alone, I expect Ysera to just see more play than this every single time. I have no idea why someone would play this over Ysera. Getting 2 spells from your opponent's class is actually really good because drawing spells late game is way better than drawing creatures because late game, if I just played a 9 mana card that drew me 2 cards, I'm not like hungry for more card advantage. What I want are things that impact the board immediately, and that's what spells do. Every spell has charge. That's why spells are better than minions. So I expect Nefarian to see less play than Ysera, but it's not, like I said, it's not completely unplayable just because if you do that kind of Demon Lock type of build where you have all of these early game cards that rely on you having a dragon in hand, and then you just play like a few, like 2 or 3 super expensive dragons so that they always rot in your hand and always give you that dragon synergy and then just sometimes win you the game against control, then it gets interesting because I think Nefarian and Ysera are like the 2 first dragons that you like. Chromaggus, Ysera are probably the 2 best. Nefarian is probably like the 3rd best. So you just put those in your deck and all of a sudden if you're just holding Nefarian in hand all game, all your dragon-based cards are insane. So he might see play just because of that. Because I can't stress enough, like Blackwing Corruptor and Blackwing Technician are very, very, very good. So that alone might make Nefarian see play. Alright, so let's get to Hungry Dragon. This is one of the first cards spoiled, and it was probably the one that people were the most excited for. And this is a card that's so, it looks so good because it is when it's good, obviously. It has a lot of similarities to Lotheb because if you have board control and you play it, it's much better because you can kill off the 1/1 pretty much immediately. I don't expect us to see as much play as Piloted Shredder. I'm just going to start off with that. I think Piloted Shredder is insane. I still think it's the best 4-drop in the game. But Hungry Dragon is a dragon, and it's just like good on its own. So, for example, a deck like Rogue, this is the card I'm most excited for Rogue. I think it's like the best Rogue card in the set. Why is that? Well, Rogue gets the hero power, and like I think 54% of the time, the 1-drop that you make for your opponent is only going to have 1 health. So if you just have a dagger equipped, you just play your turn 4, 5, 6, kill their guy. If you're not playing against Mage with Fireball, or like Shaman with Hex, they're going to Hex you for 4-drop, who cares? This is just insane for a tempo deck. You get a 4-mana 5/6. The drawback is negligible. You could have Backstab instead. If your opponent plays it and you're playing Rogue, you can sap it, and then you get a free 1/1. It's just a very, very good card for Rogue. I can't stress that enough. It's definitely one of the dragons that like rewards you the most for being a dragon-based deck. Well, it's just like one of the best dragons to be playing to enable your other dragon card. So I expect Hungry Dragon to see a lot of play in things like Paladin. I think Dragon Paladin will definitely be a thing. And it just seems like a great card, honestly. I don't think it'll take the place of Piloted Shredder in things like Druid that don't really have the time to deal with 1/1s. Because then you're kind of playing like a Lost Silt Strider. If you give them a 2/1 and you don't have the ability to kill it that turn, then you're basically playing a 4-mana 5/4, which is just not that good. Is a dragon though, but again, in decks like Druid, I expect Piloted Shredder to see more play than Hungry Dragon. But this card's still very powerful. Most excited for it in Rogue, and I definitely think it's good. Volcanic Drake, I think, might actually see more play than Hungry Dragon as far as dragons go to enable your other cards, because this effect that makes things cost 1 less is just it's very easy to trigger. I like that this mechanic is trying to encourage minion on minion action, because if you're playing cards like this, they're encouraging you to like trade guys off. Because if I just trade my Mad Scientist into something, then it's a lot of value. 2 minions died. This is a 4-mana 6/4. It's very effective. It's very fast. Great with things like Muster, Consecrate, just cards like that. Unleash the Hounds. I expect Volcanic Drake to see a good amount of play, just because pretty consistently it should be a 4-mana 6/4, which is not good enough to play on its own most of the time. The jump between 4 health and 5 health is one of the biggest jumps in the game. It completely changes what your cards die to, because a lot of the most playable constructed cards are True Silver, Death's Bite, Piloted Shredder. All of these cards wreck 6/4s. So you'll be more interested in, like, you're not playing it just for the stats, is what I'm saying, as like a 4-mana 6/4. You're playing it for the dragon synergy. And 4-mana 6/4 is definitely good enough once it's enabling all of your OP 5-mana fire elementals and stuff like that. So the Blackwing cards are insane. This is going to help enable them. And I feel like Volcanic Drake, there will be a lot of times where you get it out for like 2 mana or 1 mana or 0 mana. And those games, it could just win you on its own. So yeah, definitely a good card. I expect to see this in a lot of decks across a lot of classes. Then we can get to Rend Blackhand. If you're holding a dragon, destroy a legendary minion. This guy, he's bad, unfortunately. He's very cool, but he's very bad. If they made him a 4/8, he might be too good. So I guess it's a little tough to balance this guy. But the stats on him just make him not good enough, kind of end of story. There's the problem with Big Game Hunter. There's the problem with having 4 health on your 7-mana card. Like I said, it dies to everything. I mean, I can Abusive Sergeant my 1-drop and trade into your 7-mana card. So whether you kill the legendary or not, that's not worth the mana. So I don't expect this guy to see too much play. As more and more cards get released, there's more options to choose from. And the barrier of entry for a card making into your deck is just that much higher, because there's so many other good options to compete with. So I don't think anyone's going to have room for this crap. And we won't see too much Rend Blackhand, even if he is pretty cool. But that pretty much sums it up. Unless I missed something, I think that's the entire set. Like I said, I expect Rogue to be the best class right out of the gate. And maybe for a long time to come. It just looks really good to me. I also think it'll probably continue shitting on Paladin, which will be another really popular class. But I'm most excited about playing with Mage and Rogue, because they do degenerate things for 0 mana, a lot of cool stuff. Flamewaker, really fun. Rogue, really fun if I'm the one playing it. And yeah, Paladin is probably going to be the best class for your dragon-related shenanigans. So thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. And I'll try to have an update video for you soon about the kind of stuff that's happening with Tempo Storm. And yeah, a lot of exciting news coming out today and throughout the next week. So see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and subscribe.